Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or whatever time you're listening to this. Welcome to another episode of Dubai Real Estate Unplugged, the official podcast of House. Today, we're back with another market update, discussing some of the key takeaways from quarter three and what to look out for next. Joining me today are Philip Rist and Clementine Monroe. Welcome to you both.
Thank you very much for having me today, Luke.
Clem's up for words.
Great to be here.
Philip, off-plan sales manager.
Yes. It's a first for me today, Luke, so go easy.
Yeah, no, I will.
Just a very brief introduction of who I am. So, like I say, my name's Philip Rist, originally from the UK. I actually graduated from Nottingham Trent University back in 2005 with a degree in planning and property development. So my earlier career was as a chartered surveyor, and I originally moved to the UAE in 2008. So that's had over 16 years ago now.
Nice. And
then I moved from commercial real estate, so I was doing a lot of investment and valuation work for big companies that people would know, CBRE, Colliers International, to join House in 2021. And I guess people say, you know, the story tells itself. I haven't looked back since, and here I am today, 3 years later, and manager of one of the off-plan teams here.
Superb. Sales director, Clementine, can you beat that one?
Oh gosh, not sure.
He's thrown a lot of companies and qualifications out there, isn't he?
So I think I've worked for some of the kind of residential cousins of some of the businesses you've worked for. I've been here 12 years, so not quite as long as you. Always in the residential space. So I moved out here with Knight Frank, mostly moving money from the Gulf outward into residential investment, as the market in Dubai wasn't nearly as strong as it is now. And for the last 3 years or so, though, I've transitioned back into the local market, and I'm delighted to be at House. You're
doing a superb job as well. Okay, so we're talking quarter three. The listeners, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day they're listening to it, they're going to be wondering what is going on. And when I listen to a lot of podcasts, or I pick up the kind of these news tabloids, it's all heated, it's records, it's explosive. July, August, September, Clem. These are usually what we would say summer months. The quieter months. What have we been seeing in residential sales from your point of view?
I mean, goodness, we're beginning to sound a little bit like stuck records here. Yeah. But across 6 communities, we did achieve the highest record of sales prices across 6 varying communities in Dubai. And really that talks to just the continued positive growth and positive momentum we've seen.
Okay.
I talked about it previously, but I think where Dubai used to see a mass exodus in the summer of people holidaying abroad and perhaps only a single person within a family working, I think what Dubai is seeing now is a lot of people here, a lot of people working, a lot of people moving across the summer to get set up for the autumn. And really we just didn't see the slowdown that perhaps we'd anticipated.
Is it custom now to find that people don't completely migrate now for the summer months? Because I think this was certainly 10 years ago when I came, the roads would certainly get a lot quieter.
I think that there's a couple of things here. Firstly, back when, say 10 years ago, it used to be that Ramadan also coincided with the summer, and that's obviously moving year by year. So that as that moves towards the sort of start of the year, I think that kind of mass exodus perhaps doesn't happen quite so much.
Yeah, so it would have
you're
been...
You're still seeing a lot of the summer school holidays, people from Europe going back to Europe, but I think that the double whammy of Ramadan and school holidays is not quite there now, so now we get more of a spread out, people leaving Dubai over a longer period of time, I think.
I hear what you're saying. 6 communities, Clem, out of how many communities are we talking, approximately?
House covers about 30 different geographies, with a number 1 to 3 in 15 communities across Dubai. And in 6 of those, so in about 50% of the communities that we actively track, and we are actively arguably number 1, in 50% of those we achieved record-breaking prices in the last quarter.
You work really closely with these area specialists, so anyone that works at House is given an area and they specialise in that area and they can't work in all different areas, and that means that the client comes to us and we should know the ins and outs of that particular area. It's not common for it to happen across the whole real estate industry, but we believe it's the best way to work. You're speaking to the consultants working in these areas. What are these where are these clients coming from? What are they saying? Are they buying homes? Are they buying investment properties? Are they buying something to maybe move to in the next couple of years? Is it down to tax issues in the UK? Is it down to elections in the US? Is it down to war zones, unfortunately, in different parts of Europe or Middle East? Well,
I think if we look at some of the punchy pricing that we secured, one example would be Jumeirah Village Triangle. Anecdotally, I know because I spoke with the broker who set the record. We sold a home for 8.4 million dirhams.
In JVT?
That was beating the previous record of pricing in the community, which was 8 million dirhams, so we beat it by 5%.
Wow.
The customer purchased the home for 3.15 million a year ago, albeit they put significant renovation into it, but still I believe they left with a 46% profit margin. So that is, we're seeing pure investor, essentially, but the purchaser was an end user. They're priced out of some of the neighbouring communities, but the geography and the location of JVT is prime Dubai still. And so that is what drove that record. But again, we're setting records in places like Villanova, Green Community. Villanova, as it's got more established, there's more life coming to the community. Again, we're seeing people who were maybe Arabian Ranches 1, 2 and 3 buyers moving across the road, settling into a community that's looking a lot more green now, a lot more established. Perhaps some tenants are in their 2nd or 3rd year, so a little bit more sense of community. And records are being set because it still represented relatively good value. Again, the story in JVT, you could get the most standard home in the Meadows, or you could get the best home in JVT. You could get a standard home in Arabian Ranches, or you can get the best house in Villanova, and that's where we're seeing these records.
I think just also as a sort of additional comment there, I'm also seeing, especially in the secondary market, the people that are buying in these older, more established communities are actually far more driven by plot size than just the house itself. So in JVT especially, they have some of the largest plots you can actually get for an independent villa. And some of these villas were traditionally a 2-bedroom villa that now you can extend and make a 5-bedroom villa, but the plot size being over 8,000 square feet still makes it very viable, and that's why they're able to make these huge margins. And it's the same with Ranches 1. Typically the people that are buying there, obviously they like Emaar, they like the fact that it's very green and it's very established, but ultimately the plot sizes are very hard to find in some of the newer build communities.
So do you feel over the last kind of 6, 12 months or 2 years that people are now thinking more about, well, it's not necessarily the location that I need to be Arabian Ranches, or I need to be like these headline names of Dubai Hills Estate or Emirates Living? People are just saying, well, if my friends don't live in JVT, but I like something in JVT, it doesn't matter. I will go to JVT. Whereas before, it seems always to be about the names. And I even have been speaking to parents recently, and I was speaking to a gentleman yesterday who's gone out to look at, he's moving over. He's put his house on the market in Chiswick in London for different reasons, and he sold it very quickly. He's actually achieved £160,000 more than he put it on the market at. So although we're talking about a different geography there, and we're saying that, the market in certain parts of the world, actually there's still buyers wherever we are in the world, there's still things selling. He's looking at schools, and he's actually looking at schools based on the names of the schools, because he likes certain names of schools, because it means, my children go to
prestige,
what King's or Royal Grammar School or something. So, and the reason I say that is Arabian Ranches has this name, as does Emirates Living, and when you say JVT or JVC or Villanova, they're just not as well heard of or not known, and therefore does that then take away a bit of the you speak to the client, or the broker speaks to the clients, they're like, oof, I've never heard of it, I don't know if I want to go there.
I think it depends on the client, just in terms of not just necessarily the schools being in the community, but proximity to demand drivers. And a lot of these traditional communities will, even if they don't have that particular school in their community, it's within a 5-10 minute drive. And other very strong demand drivers, like the places of work, getting to the local shopping mall. So even though JVT hasn't historically had a shopping mall, I know there's one there now that's still not open, but you've got proximity to Jumeirah Park, so you can literally, it's on your doorstep to Jumeirah Park, and obviously very quickly then onto some of the major arterial roads around Dubai. So I don't think necessarily it's it depends on the customer and the client that's talking to you, but ultimately I think people want to have proximity to all of these major demand drivers rather than having to necessarily walk to the school. I mean, that's, I think, quite unique in Arabian ranches, which is why there's probably still a 7-year waiting list last time I checked to get into that school.
I think there's waiting lists on a lot of these schools as well at the moment.
And I think that's probably the strength of an agency like ours, where we've got, we cover enough different parts of the market that while someone might have initially inquired almost like on a brand name, so like Arabian Ranches, or we can then take them on the journey when they don't find what they're looking for. We've got experts in, as I said, 30 different communities, so we can really take them where their budget allows. And often they find that when they're in a different community, it's absolutely great. And why, you know, they completely change their mind. But I think it's being able to kind of take them from one, bring them to somewhere else, and give them the journey.
I'd like to see the stats on the people that when they first moved to Dubai as renters, what's the proportion of those people that end up actually buying in the same community they first arrived into Dubai? Because that familiarity, sometimes it's not necessarily that they love the community because when they're first new to Dubai, they just go with somewhere that feels okay for that time. But once they've lived there for a few years, even in rented, I think it's quite a high proportion of people that tend to want to stay because they've made friends in the community, their kids have made friends at the school, or whatever it might be. So they've built a network around where they initially arrived into the country. Or into the emirate, and therefore they've gone on to say, well, we want to be in Meadows, or we want to be in, you know, Arabian Ranches. I think that's, I don't know if there is any stats on it, but it'd be interesting to know.
So Clem, what else have you got for us in residential sales that's going to kind of stick out there for Q3, those summer months as I talk about that should have been quieter, but they're actually not that quiet?
Not quite. Well, on the resi side, but actually if we look at the rental side, we've got some pretty punchy data that's almost a little bit Sun newspaper headlines, but we've had a 93% increase of rental values, Q3 2024 versus Q3 2023 in Jumeirah Islands.
Nearly 100%.
And actually something, and we're the culprits, because we sold about 30 plus homes in Jumeirah Islands last year. One of them we sold a cluster and a half in one go. And what the homeowner did was they completely stripped back the units to shell and core and then have delivered them to an incredibly high spec. And now what we're seeing is these fantastic rental yields for these homeowners. And we just had a customer actually who inquired with us in the Meadows, and they just rented for 9 months in Jumeirah Islands at a price of 5 million dirhams.
Wow. And wasn't there a rental I heard recently that's gone for over 15 million for a year? Yeah. It's just high net worth individuals. We've talked about that, and we've heard about a huge amount of high net worth individuals coming into the area. Do they have supply, Clem? And that's why we're getting these, because there isn't a huge amount.
No.
Okay.
And there's supply in part on the kind of more average units, or your 2 up, 2 downs in the burbs. That's not really an issue. But if you are incredibly wealthy and you're taking your family here, and you know money is not a problem, in terms of where can I rent that is turnkey and really luxury, we are in short supply.
Yeah, sure.
And that's why we're seeing that tremendous, eye-catching 93% of growth in Jumeirah Islands. It's because some of these institutional investors caught on to the fact that this was a hotspot from its geographic location, purchased a significant amount of homes through House and House, 26 in one go, have redone them all. Some of them have been sold, but some of them are on the rental market and have had, tenants pay handsomely to live in such a beautiful home.
I'd echo that, because also there's not enough supply of these larger homes coming into the market, even on the off-plan side. So, I think we can all agree that there's only a few communities that will be able to deliver. You're talking about turnkey, be able to move directly into something like that. You've got kind of Al Barari, Palm Jumeirah, Jumeirah Islands, and
Golf estates, I'd say.
And maybe, exactly, but you've also perhaps got where Montgomery Golf Course is around Emirates living there. So, Emirates Hills would also be able to do that, provided they've obviously done an upgrade. But even so, the number of actual units we're talking about is a lot lower than the demand for those units.
So are tenants struggling, even forget the high net worth individuals, are tenants struggling in general to find a home?
Yes, and I think what we see that is quite an emotional part of the broker's job is working with families who can't afford the community that they've laid down roots in. And we're seeing that. So you've rented, or you've spent 5 years in a community, you've grown really fond of it, your children have made friends there, you love the home, and unfortunately prices are no longer you can't afford to stay there anymore, and you then certainly can't afford to buy there anymore. And that's always, that is a bit of a shame. But that's why we've seen such substantial growth in places like JVT, Jumeirah Park, Villanova, perhaps what we used to perceive as a kind of secondary or a sister community to some of the bigger names that we've spoken about. That's what's driving that migration.
Price appreciation in July was just over 1%. Then we had a big jump in August, when it well over 2%, and it's come back down in September to just over 1% again. Price appreciation, we've talked about it, and since COVID, it's gone up hugely. Clients still thinking to buy is affordable, or are they saying it's becoming less affordable? Is it somewhere now is it going to get to the stage where clients are going to say, well, I just can't afford to live in this country. I'm going to have to look at maybe Abu Dhabi or Sharjah, or I'm going to have to look at a different part of the world?
Perhaps, but we have just had further stimulus to the market by the mortgage rates going down. Mm-hmm. So obviously in the last couple of weeks, we've seen that trickle effect of what's been announced in America and the Fed really reducing their rate there. And you can now get some variable rates, back in the threes. Mm. So when debt remains cheap, demand remains high, and the traditional reasons of wanting to live here and the migration, we've had 138,000 people move to Dubai this year alone.
I heard that yesterday. That can't be total numbers, surely. I would have thought it's higher than that. Have we cut an amount of that out in terms of construction workers or salaries under a certain level?
Goodness me, what I'll do is as someone's next talking, I'll have a look at that where I received that stat, and we can revisit it.
It just, to me,
look, let's not make this seem like an insignificant number. I mean, we're talking year to date. That's the first 9 months. We've still got another quarter to go.
Yeah.
And 138,000 people. Just to put that into context for some of the listeners, Cambridge only has 125,000 inhabitants in total. Oxford in the UK has 150,000 inhabitants. So we're talking about the size of a good-sized city in the UK. Moving to Dubai in less than 9 months. Yeah,
no, and I agree with that. All I'm thinking is, if we're looking at this 2040 vision, and let's say, we're 15, 16 years away from that, and we're doubling the population.
Right.
If we're looking at those numbers of around 150,000 or 160,000, are we going to get there? Are we not going to get there? And all this kind of stuff. I just thought it actually, and I generally felt the number of buyers registering, I think per month we're getting at the moment is in excess of 8,000 buyers a month. I don't know what the tenant numbers are.
I've just checked, and that was from a population website.
Yeah.
But I think also, don't forget, a lot of people are coming here, not full-time, but a lot of people are purchasing. If you look at what's driving some of our Dubai Marina, Dubai downtown growth, it's pied-à-terre, it's holiday homes. You can get a freelance visa here for as low as 5,000 dirhams. Europe's obviously cut down the amount of time you can spend there as an expat. The UK, for certain parts of the year, isn't a particularly nice place to be, even just in terms of climate. So I think whilst the 138 perhaps talks more to people who are migrating fully, let's not forget, a huge amount of our inquiries are going to be from people looking for second, third, fourth homes. Yeah.
Interestingly enough, look at the whole of 2024, we're at about 131,000 transactions for the year. We did the Gulf did Dubai 133,000 in the whole of 2023. So we're about 2,000 properties behind. We did 18,000 plus transactions in September. We're looking at a record of about 170,000 transactions.
And traditionally, Q4 is normally very, very strong for us as well.
We touched on that. For last year, it wasn't for the
geopolitical.
Indeed. But everything is strength to strength, and I believe highest number of transactions in September, record number over 18,038, again, was ridiculous. Off-plan market taking a large part of that, which I know you'll probably touch on, Philip.
Sure.
What are we seeing in off-plan?
Well, look, in terms of off-plan market trends, it's also useful to look at the stats as well, especially important market movers like supply pipeline, what's expected to enter the market in the short term as well, and what kind of impacts that might have on the market. You already mentioned the number of transactions, but we saw almost 24,000 new units launched into the market and approximately 3,200 completed units. So actually the number of handed over units was quite small relative to the number of units that are being launched. But bearing in mind we've just touched on the population growth over the same period, there's still continues to be more demand for these units than there is actually supply of. So the Q3 number of transactions you've already mentioned is a 22% increase on the previous quarter. we've already talked about population. The next thing I was going to come on to is actually saying that in my experience, what's equally important to be aware of is market sentiment. And we talked about this the other day privately, Luke, in terms of what we're seeing, what we're hearing, what we're feeling from the market,
Which is so important, isn't it?
Of course, and we
can see all these
stats
reports.
Don't necessarily, stats are just numbers. You don't necessarily get that feeling of what are people actually saying, what's the thoughts of the people we're talking to. And I think this is really, really important. So when let's be honest, I'm at the coalface, so to speak. I'm actually talking to clients all day, every day. What are they saying and what are their thoughts and feelings on the market? So that will give us some direct feedback in terms of buyers' views, sellers' views. And what I can say is that right now, my feeling from talking to all of these people every day is that consumer confidence is high, business confidence is high, people with the money to spend are very eager to get into the market and be a participant in the market rather than a bystander. I think they've seen this growth over the last 3 years, and a lot of them are almost kind of feeling that they're going to be missing out if they don't get involved. And so actually the off-plan side of things come into it very much so, because they see that's where the bigger margins can be made, where they're getting in at the ground floor and be able to capitalise on, if they can afford the payment plan, knowing in 2 or 3 years' time they're going to make a significant amount of capital appreciation. So I think it's actually benefiting the off-plan side of the market, which is why we saw that of those transactions, almost 2/3 of those transactions came on the off-plan side, not on the secondary market side.
If I was to look at it, I'm moving out to Dubai. I can consider residential, or if I want to look at a payment plan and maybe I could rent for 4 years and get something built. I look at it and I hear that there's a new development every 19 hours being launched. Of those 19 hours, a new development every 19 hours, and that's about 350 units per day. Am I really going to see capital appreciation in the next 3 to 4 years?
Good question. And I think that's something that we should all be asking ourselves, depending on the location of those new units coming in, right? Because at House and House, of all of the projects we see every day, every week, we probably only really work on around 10% of those projects. So we're very, very selective about which projects we want to work on, who's the developer, what's their track record, and is it something that we can really get behind in terms of, do we see the value uplift? Do we see the potential of the investment here? And if so, let's give all of that information to the client so they can make a reasoned and informed decision. But actually, every 19 hours, obviously, there's a lot of those projects that we won't even be working on.
Emaar did 19.8 billion in quarter 3. I think it's as much as 6 times the amount of the next 6 developers didn't do that together. So is that what you're saying? We need to be looking at.
Well, that's also because they're putting a lot of products into the market that perhaps we haven't seen in those communities. So, for instance, a big part of that would have been the Valley, that they launched a lot of new villas and townhouses. So again, this may be a bit skewed, but we're talking about just one quarter. I think it's important to look at the year as a whole, but also the fact that Dubai's largest developer is and always has been Emaar. Since they signed the decree back in 2002, Emaar were the very first to launch projects. So I think that they have not only the brand name, but also people that are buying off plan. If they're a very first entry into the market, they like the safety and security that the Emaar brand can give them, and so it tends to be a go-to for people that perhaps aren't as well versed in the entire off-plan market. Obviously, we have lots of other options, but ultimately they are and remain the largest developer in Dubai, so they're always going to have a large market share.
Clementine, you live in an Emaar property. I live in an Emaar property, so it says a lot, right?
Yeah,
it says a lot. But these are the developers that people are going to. You mentioned Villanova, and you mentioned, I think, Green Community, which aren't Emaar. They are getting better. They're still providing good communities. I heard Inshallah on a community mall being delivered.
I think Town Square, which is Nashama, and Damac Hills are really great examples of other developers recognising that they were end-user communities, or that people were living there, and how can they really spend more time on the placemaking. So now they are fantastic places to live if you have children. They've got food trucks and trampoline parks, and so I think a lot of developers have had to say to themselves, right, what are we, what are we not? And in those places that we are not traditionally, how can we overcompensate in other areas? And I think both Damac and Emaar have done a really great job at building communities for families, real placemaking. They're not perhaps as luxury, but really good places to live and raise your families.
So are we seeing developers looking at more affordable as well? Because we talk about the high net worth individuals, but are we seeing more affordable houses? Are we seeing that there's people sitting around the tables at different developers saying, well, we can't just keep putting stuff out at 10 to 15 million dirhams, 3 million plus pounds.
Right.
Are we finding that there's communities where we can find 3 bedrooms for like 500,000 pounds?
Clementine, I don't know if you want to touch on the second one, but certainly in off-plan, all of the new major launches in terms of family communities with, as Clementine says, the parks and the schools and the shopping malls and what have you, they're kind of trying to develop a city within the city. Mm-hmm. All of those have been a little bit further out because obviously it makes it more affordable because the land is more affordable. So the likes of the Valley, the likes of Emaar South, even with Damac now launching Sun City, Riverside, they've just got a new launch coming up now called Jumeirah Islands. These are all very, very affordable. So if you can buy a 4-bedroom townhouse at 2.6 million, for a lot of people that's a lot more affordable than what you can get a 4-bedroom townhouse for in some of these more established secondary market communities. So 100% agree with that. Now, the only way to really find affordable housing is to look at some of these newer projects that are not along Sheikh Zayed Road, right? They're going to be a 20-minute drive. You know? But ultimately, especially with people more and more working from home remotely, perhaps they don't need to have a commute to DIFC. And if they do, the road system's getting better and better as well. So it's very quick to get on the 611 or to get on the 311 and get into where you need to be. So I actually think that Dubai, we call it a 20-minute city. You can get pretty much anywhere you want to go in 20 minutes. That might even stretch out to 30 minutes now. They're building further and further south. But, even coming back to your original question about, affordability in terms of relative to other countries and do we still think Dubai is affordable? If you look at Dubai on the ranking index for prime real estate prices per square metre, we are still over like number 100 in the world. I think we're at 109 at the moment in terms of price per square metre. Where else in the world can you be in a major city and be living within 20, 30 minutes commute drive without having to get on the metro of your place of work in the CBD and have a price point which is a fraction of the price you'll be paying elsewhere? I think that's the key here, is that actually, even if we talk about 2,000 or 3,000 dirhams a square foot, in relative terms in euros or pounds, it's actually a fraction of what you'd be paying if you were back in Europe or back in the UK.
We're quite biased because we live here, but are there any other countries where you get that feeling of safety, security?
Japan maybe, but I don't think that, not in Europe and not in the UK. I think
and then you'd probably have
safe.
language barriers a lot more, compared to here. But it's from I'm sure listeners will say, well, yeah, you're going to bang the drum for Dubai because obviously you're selling. No,
but I've been here for 16 years and it is very much home from home, right? All of the shops we want to go to, we have them. If you're from the US, you've got Bloomingdale's, you've got all their shops as well. If you can. So I think we're spoiled here that the business language is English, so you don't have to be an Arabic speaker, and everything feels very familiar. But you've got the weather, you've got the tax-free environment, and it is super safe and secure, as you say. So if you've got a family, it's not just personal. Obviously, personal safety is very important to be able to watch your kids run around in the park and not be worried that someone's going to take them or something's going to happen to them. But also, it's private education, it's private healthcare. I think we've probably touched on all this before in previous podcasts, but I can say that as a father, I wouldn't want them to be being brought up anywhere else. I feel that they're very, very safe here. And then obviously from a financial aspect, again, I think that people are pouring their money into Dubai because it's a financial safe haven for anybody that is traditionally from this region. If you're from Lebanon or Iraq, Iran, Egypt, if you're coming from any of these kind of countries around the region and you want even Pakistan, India, right? This is almost a second home for them. If you're wealthy and you want to, secure your wealth for future generations in terms of wealth preservation, this is where you'd want to have your money.
Well, you don't want to be taxed on tax, do you? There's a few points I want to cover. There is conflict in the region. We know, you've only got to turn on the news or, again, watch some publications. There is conflict in the region. But there's been conflict in the region for decades and decades and decades. And I think that's... you're on the coal face. And are you here... is anyone stopping thinking about putting their kids in school or renting or buying? Clem, you bought in recently. I went to a property launch yesterday that I'm really interested in. It doesn't bother me, and I live here.
No, and I think the conflict that we're seeing, it feels, pretty major conflict, but you only have to walk down the street in London to feel there's quite a domestic threat. Do you know what I mean? I'm from London, and and it doesn't feel very safe there either. So obviously it's a different level of threat. But what we're actually seeing, again anecdotally, but we've done a couple of off-plan purchases last year to some families, Lebanese nationality, beginning to feel really frustrated and thinking, actually, how can I future-proof myself? How can I create a safe haven place for us to be in the next few years? And sometimes we see it as a driver of appetite, to be honest.
So the conflict is actually a good thing for Dubai?
And we also need to be sensitive, of course. Some of our clients have, we've got to be adaptable and dynamic to knowing what different people are going through. But last week we did do a couple of they were off-plan transactions, both to Lebanese families.
Yeah, but the thing is, absolutely right. We have to be sensitive to it because people are being affected. But ultimately, it's not a new thing. As you say, Luke, since I've been here, and even generations ago, the conflict in Gaza and Israel has been there for many, many decades, and I don't think it's going away anytime soon. So I think that people that have lived here for a while, they recognise that actually the UAE as a country has always taken a very neutral stance to any conflicts around the region. It's a bit like the Switzerland of the Middle East. We don't get involved. They're very politically stable here and economically very stable. So they give that comfort to a lot of buyers that ultimately what's underpinning the demand, what's underpinning prices is that stability.
It's a generational thing that we watch headlines and we're always kind of umming and ahhing. I think anyone that's bought a property, when you come to sign on the dotted line and you know that you're making that financial commitment, there always is friends saying, are you sure you're doing the right thing? Or, no, the broker will say, oh, you're paying too much for that. There's always these things going on. A lot of friends are coming to me at the moment with all these bizarre WhatsApps saying, oh, I've seen this development. Can you tell me a bit more about it? And there are so many developments, Philip, as I said, they're launching every 19 hours. We don't get involved in a lot of these developers. Right. And clients are asking me about these, and I'm saying we just won't sell them because there are developments and there's developments, but we don't want to put people into things that maybe when they get handed over they're disappointed. But it brings me on to Expo, and I know there's been a lot of talk about Expo recently. I believe it's going into 5 key areas, and you've done quite a bit there.
Yes.
What is going on? And a good friend of ours, Stephen Leckie, said to me that a lot of people would say it's too far out, and then his answer would be too far out from what? And when you ask people too far out from what, they usually struggle to answer because it's probably something overheard at the dinner table. Well, that's far out. Yeah, but far out from it is actually very. Is Expo too far out?
Well, look, I'm a huge fan of Expo, and especially after the recent announcements. And the thing is, I can actually say that 18 months ago I wasn't. When I first heard about what they were doing down there, I also was one of those people that said, oh, it's very far away, and I hadn't educated myself on exactly what they're doing. So I'm one of the ones that you can say has really learnt from experience that actually once you drive there and actually find out where it is, what it is, I think you would be very surprised at how quickly you can get there. So from the marina, we're only 10 minutes from the marina, and it's very, very quick. And the fact that the Sheikh himself, Sheikh Mohammed, has now just announced that this is now going to be Dubai's city of the future, I can come on to some of these stats later on, what they're investing there and how that's going to impact on the overall city. That definitely Dubai is moving south. So, get used to the idea that is the way.
Abu Dhabi moves north, Dubai moves south.
Moves north. So I think it's really important when you talk about any new development, first and foremost is who's behind it, who's building this. And so for anyone that doesn't already know, it's actually the government 100% backed by the government. So this is not, some 50-50 JV, it's actually the government themselves. The chairman of Expo City is His Highness Sheikh Ahmed bin Saeed Al Maktoum. So that's the brother of the ruler of Dubai. Now that is also the same chairman of Emirates Airlines. It's really important to know who are the people behind the Expo, and so when they say they're building it, it really is going to happen. So that gives a lot of buyers a lot of comfort now as well. You also have to understand that they've already launched 1,500 units here and pretty much sold out everything they've launched. So again, the proof's in the pudding in terms of when they do a new launch and they're selling out, clearly there's a lot of interest for this area, not just because of the Expo itself and the legacy they're creating there, but also everything else that's coming up around it. So they already have the Expo Metro line that stops directly at the exhibition halls there. Obviously, they've announced the new Al Maktoum Airport, which is going to be the world's largest airport, 5 runways, and 260 million passengers capacity per year is what they're announcing. This is huge for the city, obviously. And then you've got one of the world's largest dry docks in Jebel Ali Port as well. So that commercial corridor, and Expo sits right in the middle of that. It's got 14-lane highways in every direction because of the Expo itself when it happened in 2020. And now they've just announced a 10 billion dirham expansion plan for the exhibition halls, which will triple the size of the exhibition halls down at the Expo site. So they'll be able to cater for 600 events a year.
Wow.
Rather than 300, and that's going to triple their revenues from events here, from 18 billion dirhams to 54 billion dirhams. And these are significant numbers. And if you're thinking about where's a good off-plan opportunity, knowing this is all coming in the next 5 to 10 years in terms of what they're building, I mean, they've already started to, like I say, launch, and the handover will be Q1 2026 for Expo Valley. So they've launched another 500 units now. It's coming up in the next few weeks. If anyone's actually interested in knowing more, there's the new launch coming. So it's a really exciting time for the city, I think, in terms of their plans. If you want me to, I can go into, I don't know how much time we've got, but I can really go into a bit more detail on the 5 districts and what they're actually planning there. It might be useful for people to know about.
It's probably, I would say, they could get in touch with you, Philip, regarding that, because it seems like you're
well, I could talk. Yeah, exactly. I could talk.
It seems like you're pretty keen on Expo.
Well, let me just touch on a couple of things. Then I think also just highlight just how much other people are believing in this. So you've got some significant companies moving to Expo and putting their headquarters for the Middle East in the area. So Siemens headquarters already there, DP World's headquarters already there, Terminus headquarters, which is a Chinese robotics and AR company, already signed up for Expo City. You've also now, they've announced that Live Nation, Wio Bank, Spinneys, Fujifilm, these are all going to the Expo. And there's also another Fortune 100 company that I can't mention on air because it's not official, but I know they're going there, which is really, really super exciting news for Expo as well. Now, these are all choosing to go to this area because they see it as, like I said, the future city for Dubai.
Are you seeing people thinking about going there as investors or going there that they're going to live there?
Both. So look, the Expo Valley is very much an end user market, I believe, because they're producing things there that you cannot buy elsewhere. You know, earlier we were talking about plot sizes and new launches. It's very hard to find the right kind of plot size. I had a client that bought with me last week a Mahal villa, and actually they've gone from a 5,000 square foot house in the ranches to a 7,500 square foot villa at Mahal Villa. So the 50% floor area is 50% bigger, but the plot size is 8,000 square foot, which is actually a very large sized piece of land for a new villa. If you try to compare that size plot and villa elsewhere in the ready-built market, the price would not be 13.3 million, it would be 20 million. You know, and I think that's where the value is to be had. And bear in mind, these are 3-story villas, so they have the underground basement parking, which is also very unique. They've also raised the earth up by 15 metres, so that's why it's called the valley. They've created a valley and then dumped the earth on the outsides to create basically a raised platform for these villas, which means they can never be flooded. You know, if people have been, you know, victims of floods in the past, this is an area where they cannot be flooded, basically, which is very important for end users. On the investment side, it's very much more they're launching apartments directly in the city itself. And here, because of the exhibition halls, because of the new 30,000 capacity stadium and arena they're going to have there, because of all the new events space, but also they've got they're bringing the opera house there as well. Not the Dubai Opera, but a similar type opera house will be going into Expo as well. All of these new events will obviously create a lot of demand from short-term rentals, both on the corporate side of the market and the leisure side of the market. So you're hitting both prongs of the tourism market and the corporate side of the short-term rentals market. And so I think that the fact that these properties are all smart home technology as well, you can change the locks from your app on your phone, you can change the air. This just means it's very easy for people to buy something at a small price point that's going to be very easy. It's turnkey, like you were saying earlier, you could literally just rent it out immediately on short-term rentals. Bearing in mind, look, for instance, GITEX is moving to Expo next year. So that's a huge exhibition that is going to be here in the Trade Centre this year, and next year will be at Expo. You know, that's a huge event that would actually, you know, most people say that's one of the biggest events in Dubai's calendar. And so going forward, every major event and exhibition is going to be held at the Expo.
It's interesting, Clement, it's probably something that when these start getting handed 2026, you say they start
handing? Q1 26.
It'll probably be an important part of residential sales and a big development of what's going on. Clem, Q4, what are you thinking?
To be honest, as we've said, we always have to take the data with a pinch of salt.
Yeah.
Because we could talk about Emirates Living as a whole, but actually the Springs performs differently to the Meadows, which performs differently to the Lakes.
Yeah.
And even within the Springs 1 can perform completely differently from Springs 15.
Yeah.
So you really have to look at it as from a kind of micro level.
Yeah.
But what we're continuing to see across the villa communities, which falls in my remit, is a positive outlook. And some of the ways, a bit like we can see if the roads are busy, Dubai feels full. I go home, leave at about 6:20 every day, and there are still a lot of bums on seats. People are on the phones. The amount of viewings that the team are doing at the weekend. Last month we were 146% of target. We're already at about 70% of target for today, with still a week left to go on the month.
Yeah.
We are busy, busy, busy.
Are you seeing the same on apartments?
I think apartments, particularly in areas where that there's a bit of a story to tell. So downtown still soaring, Dubai Creek Harbour,
Yeah,
absolutely smashing it. Yeah, and month after month, particularly as the team gets momentum and we place more candidates into the team and develop that out. And then let's not forget about Palm Jumeirah,
crazy.
more on the ultra high net worth side, but still some pretty record-breaking transactions that we're involved with there.
Superb. That's all we have time for today. Thank you for joining me, Philip and Clementine, and thank you for all our listeners for tuning in. For an in-depth look at Dubai's Q3 market performance, don't miss our latest market reports. The links will be in our show notes. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast on your preferred platform to stay updated. Philip, I'm sure if anyone wants to talk about Expo, they can reach you.
There's a few more things I wanted to add.
I'm sure there was, but we've got to that time. Thank you ever so much, Clem. Thank you, Philip.
Thanks for having me.
See you next time.